Seems like there is no geographic bound to what is being built now these days and the opportunity for venture investors like you to invest in.
One of the big stories of the last 10 years has been the globalization of entrepreneurship. Europe has been a big part of that story. And, not that long ago, you would meet a European entrepreneur and they would want to be the best company in France or the best company in Germany or, the UK. And then really in the last, 5, 6, 7 years, people basically became more confident. Now, anybody that you meet in those countries wants to build the biggest, largest global category leader.
All right, welcome back to OK Computer. I'm Dan Nathan. I am joined by Florian Douetteau. He is the co-founder and CEO of Dataiku, and Matt Turck, who is a partner at FirstMark Capital. Very good friend. Welcome back to the pod, Matt.
Thanks for having me back.
Florian, how about this? In town from Paris, and you decide to come over to OK Computer for our Funders and Founders series. This is, I think, at the 5th episode in this series, and we've had a lot of great conversations with some amazing founders and folks who've led some of their early rounds. And we've really kind of focused on the background of the founders and just obviously the reason and the mission for the business, but what also attracted them or attracted the investor to the organization and how that relationship's involved and the like. And yours, when Matt and I were kind of talking about like who would be great to come on this series, he said, Florian, for a whole host of reasons. I know you led their Series A, back in 2016, and you've been on the board, and you guys have done a number of financings since then and partnered with a lot of great investors. And obviously, Matt, you guys have participated along the way here. I'd love to start, Florian, a little bit about your background and how you founded this firm. And then I'd love Matt to talk about a little, what attracted you to Florian as an entrepreneur and obviously the company and the mission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for having me. As a background, I started the company in 2013, as in 11 years ago. And so back then I was already passionate by data. And at that time, the world was evolving quickly with companies very interested into how they could actually leverage data more. Back then, we were talking about big data. And as companies were building those assets, they were also discovering how to use AI, traditional AI, more effectively, the so-called machine learning capabilities and data science back then. And my passion was like, how can you make it available to as many people as possible? And my gut sense was that, you don't have enough data scientists in the world to do everything that data science can do. And so can you build a platform, a tool powerful enough for more people to actually do that, leverage that and make it easier to use? And that's how I started Dataiku back then.
Yeah. And so how is the mission evolved over the last 10 years? Because it's interesting. You guys are not one of these, this American term, Johnny-come-latelys to the space. And we've all been around. We remember, the late 90s and how just this transformative technology of the internet and the promise, how it was changing first tech companies and how they thought about the business that they were in, but then almost every other sort of industry. And a lot of folks did a lot of goofy things, but you guys have been here from the beginning. Obviously machine learning and data science is your background, but kind of evolving towards AI. I went back and looked at some of your writings from 7-8 years ago. You were talking about things that seem very common now, in the tech landscape, but they weren't that common back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. But I think that sometimes as an entrepreneur, you're lucky and sometimes you're not lucky. When you're not lucky, you have to pivot and so forth, and then you become lucky. Maybe you get your luck through pivot. In our case, I think that we stayed on the same mission, which is like, how you democratize those technologies. And it's just that those technologies evolved a lot in the last 10 years. Back 10 years ago, it was really about like, how you stitch data together, or you build like simple models, or can you make sure that companies derive value out of data in a very easy fashion. And now you do almost sci-fi kind of things. And indeed, we add, and as an engineer from my background being in engineering, I like that. I like to build platforms that have to evolve through time. And we had to make our own product to evolve in order to match this constant evolution of technologies. And indeed, as of late, we integrated with generative AI and the large language models in order to provide this power back to our customers.
Yeah, so like enterprise AI, give us the 411, because a lot of us have been really focused on some of these consumer-facing sort of products, and I think that's captivated a lot of the headlines of late. But when you think about, like, in my world, as a public markets investor and a pundit, we spent a lot of time talking about some of the biggest companies globally by market cap and what they're doing in generative AI. And some of them have gained trillions of dollars in market cap just on some of these things. There are large enterprise components of that, right? So talk to us about what enterprise AI means to you and your company, Dataiku.
Enterprise AI is this ability to use AI to make your business more efficient. That's about it. And then it trickles down to every aspect of your business. That's where it becomes complicated, because it's literally every aspect of the business. We see use cases in HR, in finance, in operation, in research, in how you sell, in how you promote, in how you support your customers, and so forth. Because everywhere there is a human, everywhere there is a process, you can actually leverage AI and the data and the history and now generative AI in order to automate and make better decisions.
How has this changed, though? Because you gave a great example in 2013. You were really focused on big data. And I remember, again, this is going back to me sitting on CNBC's Fast Money desk. And, we get to see narratives. We get to see how, the C-level suite adjusts to what, is working in the market. And I remember one day, and I want to say it was probably 14 or 15, where eBay finally talked about using big data, structured, like all this, unstructured data, and how it was going to drive efficiencies and yada, yada, yada. And I remember the stock gapping up huge, you know what I mean? So that's in my world a little bit, but you were in the big data space, 10 years ago. What's the through line, right, over the last decade or so to where we are as far as enterprise AI? Because a lot of it is obviously, like to your point, has been building on this one after another over the last decade or so.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the world of technology is a world where you've got initially lots of expectations that can drive the market. And then you've got execution that is initially slower than expected, but ultimately has potentially bigger impact. Actually, usually bigger impact than initially expected. Indeed, back 10 years ago, it was lots of expectation related to big data, but companies were struggling in terms of like how to get things done. But over time, most companies actually build capabilities in terms of so-called traditional AI, using AI to help you with your pricing strategy, to help predict demand, make sure that you purchase the right number of goods, don't have unnecessary inventories, make sure that you can personalize the way you address to your customers, make sure you can leverage internal and external data to manage better your assets. Like, those models are running continuously, and large organizations have typically these days hundreds of models in productions. So they use AI models, their own tiny models based on their data, on a daily basis. And that's just a fact. And they build those assets over time in the last 10 years. And now it's a new wave with new expectations, where maybe with generative AI, we can actually further bring that along to a next level of automation. That's how I see that.
Yeah, well, we'll talk more about execution and expectations a little bit later. Matt, you've been writing the MAD, the machine learning, artificial intelligence, and data landscape. I think we should call it, I got a bone to pick. Shouldn't it be like MADE? You know what I mean? Like now, like MAID a little bit, or no? I mean, would that kind of screw up everything? I know you've worked very hard on this every year for the last, 10 years, 11 years? I mean, it is an amazing report. I think it's one of the last times that you and I spoke when you launched your 2023. And at the time, I remember thinking, ChatGPT, I think 3.5 had just come on the scene, and we just started to see a lot of excitement, at least in the public markets. Obviously, you have been investing in this space in the private markets for a while. But let's just, let's talk a little bit about just kind of the evolution of your thought process in and around these technologies and what attracted you to Florian and Dataiku in the first place.
Yeah, it's interesting because my history with Dataiku comes directly from that work in many ways. So look, that's a little bit of a cliche in venture capital, which is that any good investment comes from knowing a secret or two, meaning that you know something about the world that not many people know just yet. And in the case of Dataiku, there were effectively two secrets. One was that data science, machine learning, and AI in the enterprise was going to be a big deal. And to the point about big data that we were discussing a minute ago, for me, that was the very clear next step. All right, so you have all these massive amounts of data, you have all these technologies, Hadoop back at the, back in the day, at that time, to store it. The next bit was, okay, what are you going to do with it? And data science and machine learning was really the way to extract knowledge and action from all of that. So that was one bit. It was going to be a big deal. And, back when they were doing their Series A, or even after, I had some VC friend that would come to me and say, well, data science is just like a tiny market. Like, there's like 2 data scientists per company. Like, how is that company going to make any money? But that was a secret. So, like, that's going to be a big deal. And the second secret, which, where I had an unfair advantage by way of my background, was to know that France is an amazing country for this type of thing. France has a long tradition around AI that goes back to math education and all the things. And, Yann LeCun, one of the 3 godfathers of modern AI, is French, and so on and so forth. And I knew that French engineers in particular were particularly strong in that domain. And, it's one of the very rare moments in my venture capital career, perhaps the only one, where at the same time I had 2 companies coming to us for a Series A investment. There was Dataiku, and there was another American company. It was very smart people. But I knew that to build a data science and enterprise AI platform, you needed to build a lot of product, and you needed to have a lot of engineers doing very productive work. And I love the idea of working with a French company where, like, for the same $10 million, you could have like 2 or 3x more engineers doing fantastic work and that AI background. And that's why I chose to partner, and of course Dataiku then chose to partner with me, which is a separate thing.
What attracted you to a New York venture firm back then to lead your Series A and partner with you at that point?
Well, I think twofolds. One aspect is like just getting to the US as quick as possible when you start from Europe is paramount, just because that's where you're making the enterprise software market. That's just a fact. You need to, and we had, right before our Series A, had proven our ability to actually engage with Fortune 5,000 customers and American ones. And so I was like, we just need to double down. We just need to be able to have the means to execute and to be recognized locally, and build our workforce, our sales force locally in the US. So that was motivation number one, and especially New York as a place where you could actually build the operation of the company, as being in between the West Coast and Europe, like the ideal location when you're starting from Europe. And second aspect was more intuitive personae, meaning at the end of the day, a Series A investor, if you're successful, is someone you meet for quite some time, as in multiple years. And I'm sometimes saying that when you work in a startup, if you're not successful, it doesn't really matter. But if you're successful, you're in for like 15, 20 years, which is more than most relationships. And so you actually need to select people intuitive personae. And Matt had an uncanny perspective on our market. Again, back to his work with the MAD landscape. And yeah, I think it was the perfect fit for us.
So he and I have talked about the MAD landscape, and it's something here. It's taken like a life of its own in New York over the last, I guess, how long have you been doing like the in-person events? Because I've yet to been invited to one. I don't know why, but I see lots of.
I know people who can get you.
Okay, fine. But I see lots of video, and I see all the engagement on social. I mean, they're big in-person events, and they get lots of play, and they have lots of like great founders and investors talking about stuff like well before it's, in my opinion, before it's like on the tips of, let's say, some of the chamolis like me on CNBC's tongue. You know what I mean? So I find it a great resource. And oftentimes when I'm researching a topic for a podcast, you will have already had the CEO founder of a company that I'm looking at on there. Talk to me a little bit about that ecosystem. And like, for instance, for someone like Florian and his team over in Paris who are trying to get greater connectivity here, greater brand awareness with the sort of companies that ultimately you hope to sign up as customers. What does that meant for you as a venture investor? But you're also really into the content. You're very passionate about it. That's almost its own vertical for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do three things maybe for clarity for like anybody listening to this. So I do the MAD landscape, and MAD stands for machine learning, AI, and data, which is a giant market map that comes every year. The 2024 edition actually should come out in the next couple of weeks.
Waiting for it.
I'm saying this.
It's been changing a lot, I'm assuming, over the last couple
it's been
months.
changing quite a bit, and like every year it becomes harder to do. But anyway, so I do the landscape, and then I do an in-person event called Data Driven NYC, which is a big meetup, with 20,000 members, which has become the largest data and AI meetup in the country. And then the third thing I do is now I have a podcast. I'm a VC, so I have to have a podcast, right? So that's the MAD podcast. So
what do you talk about, like the Ukraine war, Gaza?
Yes,
like
exactly.
All that sort of stuff?
Completely.
Okay.
Yeah, because
a lot of crypto.
because I'm a VC. Therefore, all my opinions,
I'm just checking.
all my opinions on the world matter.
Yes.
No. So we talk about the same exact topics as the above. But doing the three things is fun to do, and has the power of creating communities and creating relationships and opportunity to speak with a lot of people and all the things. But ultimately, for me, it's not about creating the content. So it's almost not the output that matters. It's the input. It's the forcing function as a venture capitalist to every week, every month, every year, having to do the work. And the fact that it's public forces me to do the reps. So it's like going to the gym almost, if you think about it. So that's the. Do
you think VCs have gotten kind of lazy? Because it seems like it's one of those.
I think it's like all jobs, right? Like you have 80% of people that are doing an okay job. Out of the 80%, there's probably a bunch that do a pretty bad job, and then you have 20% that do a fantastic job. And my partner Rick, that's at FirstMark. Like humbly, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be in that elite group, and as all things, it's super hard to get to that group.
How has it been? Because I was with Rick this summer, and he's on the board of a company in London. He's on the board of a company in Austria. You're obviously on the board of a country in France. You guys, geography is not something that you obviously being here in New York, you sit in kind of the middle of Europe and the West Coast and the like here. How has that kind of played into some of the strategies? Because like to your point about Florian, we just seen some big deals with some large U.S. enterprise companies, with a French company, that's building a large language model. It seems like there is no geographic bound to what is being built now these days, and the opportunity for venture investors like you to invest in. It seemed like in the last cycles, it seemed to be a bit more, whether it be West Coast centric, a lot of the fintech stuff here in New York. It just seems like it's really opened up a lot over the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big stories of the last 10 years has been the globalization of entrepreneurship. And Europe has been a big part of that story. And, not that long ago, you would meet a European entrepreneur and they would want to be the best company in France or the best company in Germany or, the UK. And then really in the last, 5, 6, 7 years, people basically became more confident. And now anybody that you meet in those countries wants to build the biggest, largest global category leader. Like nobody's interested in being a local champion. And that's because they've seen companies do it. So if you think of the, UiPath and Celonis and Is Dataiku in enterprise AI, people have done it again and again, and that's completely shifted mentalities over there. And so we, FirstMark, love that trend and love those companies that start in Europe, have global ambitions from day one, and then end up having a foot in Europe and a foot in the US. And typically you would have product and technology in Europe, and then you would have most of the go-to-market in the US. That works super well time and again.
All right, so this might be cheesy, and we can always cut it out if you guys don't like it, but I'm going to go with it right now. So last week on Funders and Founders, we had the CEO and co-founder of Perplexity on. Okay, so Arvind Srinivas, I know you've talked to him at Data Driven. So my producer, Jacob, who does a great job helping me research the topics and the people that come on the pod, he thought it would be fun to figure out what Perplexity would think it would be good to ask Florian about your company. So I'm going to try a couple of these questions and you tell me what you think about this, okay? So on enterprise AI and business optimization, explore the concept of enterprise AI focusing on optimizing business processes rather than futuristic applications like flying cars. What do you think of that, Florian? Is that a decent question? We went to the answer engine at Perplexity.
Yeah, I think it's a decent question. I think it almost calls for an essay for me to write. Yeah. But indeed, and I wonder whether actually this sentence of flying car is actually something I actually said in the past.
Oh, really?
So yeah. I kind of like recognize myself, which is funny.
Yeah.
But indeed, a lot about enterprise AI is indeed about like very mundane use cases, which starts with how can you recommend the proper product, send the proper content to your audience? How much handbags will be sold in China next year, next quarter, next week based on history? Like that's where it starts. And indeed, that's where you get today the efficiencies coming from in terms of business operation from enterprise AI. It does require discipline. It does require the right data infrastructure, but it does also requires people, meaning people from the domain, people from the business being involved and working on the data in order to actually reap those benefits. And I think that's a revolution that we have seen in the last 10 years is like all of the people coming from the business getting their hands into data instead of like asking for someone dummy reports, getting way more sophisticated, getting way more data-driven. And it changed destiny of businesses that were able to do so.
So it's interesting. So Jacob just put in my chat right here. So in a conversation with you in 2021, you did make some reference to flying cars. So is this going to start freaking you out a little bit? Because, you know, in my business, people look at me and they often think I'm like a journalist because I'm on CNBC. I'm not a journalist. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. So oftentimes people will say, you know, off the record or this and that or whatever. So you've written a lot. You're on social. You speak at events that maybe you think are being recorded or not. You don't know, that sort of thing. All of this stuff is going to be coming back and it's going to become a narrative. You know what I mean? With these platforms, I guess like a rapper like Perplexity has the ability to draw on a lot of different models that are doing a whole host of different things. How do you think about that, Matt? Because it's kind of interesting. I have a couple other really good questions, I think, here from Perplexity, and I'm worried about losing my podcasting job. But in the meantime, maybe you can help me think about this a little bit.
In terms of their business opportunity?
Well, I'm just saying like the fact that, we could literally just put a few really good questions into this and it could pump out a whole narrative, which gives us good questions to have these sorts of conversations. It's just kind of like things are just accelerating in a way. Like there were engines that did this sort of stuff, but they weren't unleashed. You know what I mean? Like there was something about ChatGPT 3.5 that really did something infinitely better than whatever the prior thing is, right? So I'm just saying, like you just said this about your 2023 Mad Landscape, that came out in January. It's March, bud. Like where are we in 2024? Are things moving too quickly? Are things changing it? You know what I mean? Too fast. I'm just curious, like how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, it looks like I'm wildly enthusiastic about all those new tools coming up. I think we all are in the early innings of figuring out how to use them. It's interesting that you mentioned Perplexity. I use Perplexity as well. Like, so I did Data-Driven, the March edition of Data-Driven last night, and it did the same exact thing. Interestingly enough, in my questions for Florian, that one of them was widely hallucinated. So Perplexity suggested I asked Florian about Dataiku's synthetic data vault product. And, I'm on the board. I was like, should I?
It's not really easy.
All right, we'll cut that.
Should I know about this product? But I just think it's fantastic, and I think no super original thought here, but I think the way we all do work is going to evolve dramatically, and we're just going to be able to do more. We can be video producers and text producers.
I sent you an email from a friend of mine who's in the finance space. He's a content creator and he does charts and he does, predictions about where the market's going based on a quant model that he has or whatever. and he's using Synthesio. This is obviously a portfolio company of yours, as an avatar to kind of articulate content. You know what I mean? It's just giving him a lot of leverage and the like. So I think all of us, if no matter what business you're in, to your point, not an original thought, but we're all seeing our workflows change dramatically. All right, let's get back to the enterprise, because when you think about it, like, and this is one thing, again, this was, Perplexity, a company that a lot of people, it's on the tip of many people, has $10 million in revenue. Okay. So at this point, it's not particularly important. When you think about revenue opportunities, these large enterprise customers, right? Talk to us a little bit about how you work with large enterprise. You must have some big partners, but you must also obviously have, dozens, if not hundreds of customers. Florian, help us think about who you partner with and who your customers.
Yeah, we have hundreds of enterprise customers throughout the world, including 200 of the Fortune 2000 companies, so fairly large organizations. And so the way we like to think about our business is to partner with them in order to transform the way they think about data and their journey to AI. A lot around that is about enabling a self-service approach to analytics and ML and AI. And it's really about enabling people in the business to get access to their data, to build models on their own and so forth. Because I deeply believe that the actual revolution of AI is about empowering people having the domain expertise to become data experts. You could have the other perspective, the perspective that you could teach someone new in the company with a degree in data science to know everything about your company and get the job done. But I never seen that work at scale. And the opposite, you've got in many organizations, people that are really passionate about their domain, really passionate about the product. They have lots of ideas. But these days, in order to apply those ideas, you need data, you need AI. You need to use it in order to scale it. And with tools like ourselves, we found a way to actually give access to the data, access to AI techniques, so that people coming from a domain, like product managers, like supply chain managers, like aerospace engineers, which are, technically rocket scientists, but they are not data people for that matter. Like those people can actually leverage data more and transform the way business are done. And so that's how we work with large organizations. And what I'm when you start as a founder, you're never sure of what will work, what won't work. And today we are in a situation where we've got the largest pharmaceutical companies of the world, the largest retailers, the largest banks, and so forth. So we reached some milestone there in terms of relevance. But indeed, I think that the best mistake, or the worst mistake actually you can make as a founder is to be complacent. We are still small, even at our size compared to what we could be given the opportunity of AI.
So talk about some of those verticals. You just mentioned healthcare and financial services. Are these two of the biggest verticals that you guys are focused on right now?
Yeah, there are some of the verticals, but our product is actually fairly generic and applicable to multiple industries. So we also have large insurance companies, large retailers, large manufacturers in automobile or aerospace as customers. Because that's the fun part. We're talking about AI and generative AI, but the actual revolution of the last 10 years is that data is everywhere. You've got sensors everywhere, which is to some extent why we can talk about AI now, is because for the last 10 years, there was digitalization and this revolution of data that is kind of the foundation to actually build those AI capabilities.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And we were talking about this a little bit before. Obviously, your focus as a founder is just kind of mission driven, and you keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And a lot of the noise in and around the space, whether it's some new startup that's funded by X and such, or this publicly traded company just touched $2 trillion in market cap because they're focused on this, or whatever. Those are things that catch headlines. Those are things that I talk about all the day. Matt, you have one eye on them because it's speaking to the sentiment in and around the space a little bit, but it's not really driving a lot of the decisions that you're making on a day-to-day basis. But I know you also read a lot of smart folks as I do too. And here was something this morning from The Information, and the title was Amazon, Google quietly tamped down generative AI expectations. In the past year, major technology firms have championed Gen AI as the next big thing, boosting the stock market to new highs. But behind the scenes, representatives of major cloud providers and other firms that sell the technology are tamping down expectations with their salespeople and the like. So that's interesting. That's one, publication. That's one story. That might not be a trend. It's kind of probably where I think it's going, at least starting with the public markets, because we've just totally overshot in terms of market capitalization. When you think about a company like NVIDIA that has been at the forefront of every major technology shift over the last 5 or 6 years because of their GPUs, whether it was crypto mining, whether it was gaming, whether it was data center, so here we are in generative AI, and I get it. But this time, in 2 months, it's gained $1 trillion in market cap. It's doubled. In my 25-year career in finance, I've never seen such a thing. You know what I mean? So I guess, when I see a story like this makes sense to me. So thoughts on that, Matt, about just kind of sentiment, just like a little bit of a vibe check here with what's going on. And you can do it in, combination between public and private market.
Yeah, so it's always the unpopular thing to say because, we're in this moment where there's like a belief system that puts itself in place where, you have to be more enthusiastic than the next person. And, the minute you say something that is not 100% enthusiastic, then you're labeled as a non-believer kind of thing. But look, I've been at FirstMark for 10 years. This is my third AI hype cycle. There was one in, 2013, 14 when deep learning came onto the scene. There was another one around 17, 18 with like chatbots and all those things and TensorFlow. And this is the third one. So like the third one is very public because of ChatGPT. Suddenly, people realize the power of the thing. And by all means, AI keeps getting more impressive. But I think it's always the same thing. What goes up must come down at some point. The stock price of NVIDIA is unnatural. So I'm actually very bullish on NVIDIA, medium term, long term. I think in the short term, I think it's going to be tricky. I think no company can really match these expectations. And look, the market is self-correcting. There are competitors emerging, there are people raising. So of course, it takes a long time to build an AI chip company. But that is happening. Then NVIDIA and TSMC are working on, addressing that GPU shortage. So the market at some point is going to just realize that there is not that much demand of GPU right now. Long term for sure. I think a lot
of double, triple ordering, and it could be China. It could have been a whole host of things. Need for that product right now.
And in some ways, it's almost like unfair to NVIDIA. Like they've been at it since the mid 90s, right? So like everybody's getting excited about them, but those guys have been doing like incredible work for a very long time. And they've been playing the long game, and having the longest view in the room about why the world needs GPUs. And then suddenly overnight, people just realize it's so important. So the stock price shuts up. It's almost unfair to them because it's going to go down almost inevitably.
Yeah. Florian, maybe the last one for you here is again, we spent some time talking about your background as, a data scientist, engineer, and a builder. And this is, you've been at Dataiku for more than 10 years now. You built other companies prior. What does it feel like? Obviously, you've had hundreds of millions of dollars invested in your company. You've done deals with some of the biggest enterprise companies on the planet. You continue to build, but now to see a sort of, I'll call it an interest bubble. We don't have to put our finger on just, a valuation bubble, private or public, is who knows, that could continue to go for a long time. But what does it feel like to have one of these hype cycles come your way? You know what I mean? As far as things that you have believed about, the technology industry, about every industry, how, what you're building will actually find its way into a lot of other different industries. I'm just curious, how does that feel as a CEO, as a co-founder of a company who's basically established yourself as a player in the industry, and now everyone else is focused on what you've been doing for a long time?
Yeah, I think the trick is to keep thinking ahead, to force oneself to keep thinking about what will be the market 5 years from now, not the market today, and to keep pushing for that reality forward instead of either the constraints or the opportunity of the moment. And I think that's a challenge for many companies, many organizations, but probably most CEOs, which is how you actually keep building a vision for 5 years ahead, which is, and when I say vision, I don't mean vision in the pure mission vision sense, which is sometimes a bit abstract. It's really thinking about what are the underlying economic drivers of the market, what types of products people will actually pay for, how do you actually maximize value capture in the future, what are the partners to get, what are the partners to drop, this kind of thinking. And I think the challenge is that indeed, when you've got a bubble, like this intensity of AI, you might just like get sucked into the moment. You could be like, oh my God, everyone is talking about AI. So am I thinking about AI? And indeed, you've got some external reality about AI, which are, for instance, right now, very much consumer focused. It's all about chatbot. It's about whether the new Twitch would be an AI Twitch, where instead of our kids looking at video games, they will look at AI players or AI agents or AI interviewers talking to one another all the time. Maybe that's a new reality we'll be sucked in. And so it's like all about, instead of like thinking about this, which is like more the moment and this intensity or this dream that people have today, or you actually think about the vision of your market, like in our case, enterprise AI 5 years from now, and the kind of things we need to build today to make it happen. And that's the trick. That's the challenge.
Yeah.
Not to play Florian's hype man, but Florian over the years has been extraordinarily good at specifically that, in addition to other things. And I was actually never quite sure what the secret was, but when you're a startup CEO, you got a million things to do, a million places to be, and Florian is uniquely good at being that chess player that thinks about 3 moves from now. And that was true as a seed stage company, that was true as a Series A, B, C company. And now that we are a pre-IPO company, that's still very much that. So it's been pretty impressive. What is the secret? Is like good people around you? Like, how do you do it?
I use an AI. That's
Well, hopefully we don't use too many AIs for too many things, because I left a bunch of perplexity questions on the cutting room floor here, people, and it would have been a good conversation. But listen, guys, I really appreciate the conversation between the two of you. It's always really fun to hear this sort of relationship and how it's evolved and how you're adapting to the current environment. So Matt and Florian, I really appreciate you joining us on OK Computer, the Funder and Founder series. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.